Let's talk about cybercrime. Cybercrime for retirees, mainly because they seem to be the easiest and most vulnerable people to target. So let's highlight a few of the problems. So let's say you receive an email from your brother or your sister or your son, your daughter, your grandchild, saying that they are in trouble and they need to borrow $5,000. So without even asking or without even thinking, you transfer the money into their bank account that is in that email. So a couple of weeks later, you're talking to that person and say, am I ever going to get that money back? And they're going to go, what were you talking about? So when it comes to how do I make sure that I am protecting myself, we want to make sure that we are not going to get scammed at that level, because that is really, really bad, because there's a huge number of repercussions. There's no way out. You just lost $5,000 and it might have been your worldly savings while you were doing it. So let's talk about some of the problems that these systems are going to create going forward. So the dilemma for the senior or the elderly or the retired is pretty simple. One is, if you want to communicate with family and friends and colleagues, you need some sort of digital device that is going to allow them to do that. Now, if you are going to be in that situation, you need to have that capability of being able to talk to someone. Okay. Now, the world has got a lot smaller, mainly because of the digital environment, but it's also managed to isolate a huge number of people because they don't like the digital environment they've been forced into. So we can go down to Harvey Norman or JB Hi-Fi or Telstra, the Telstra shop or the Optus shop or the AAPT shop, and we can buy a device. Now, whether that device is a phone or a tablet, or maybe you get a laptop that has the capability of being able to get on the internet, then that's great as well. But the problem with that whole situation is this digital environment doesn't come with a handbook. So, yes, we know how to run this, we know how to press the buttons, we know how to use the keyboard, but we don't understand the concept of what happens in the digital world. And because of that, we then have other problems that come about. Okay, it's a great tool, communicating, socialising, shopping, and that's really good, except if you're in a situation where that is not going to be to your benefit. There's also dangers. And what we've got to remember is there's going to be dangers and scams and viruses, and we have to be very sure about how this is going to work for us. And because of that, we just have to make sure that the system is going to be as well secured and protected as it can be. So why are the elderly and the retired prime targets? Well, for one reason, they think they are invisible to the criminal. Okay, we have this attitude when we buy something, we expect it to work. We don't take the digital environment into account very much in that respect. We think there is no reason to target them. We don't have large amounts of money, or some of us do, but most of us don't. We don't have access to intellectual property. What we do have is access to information about ourselves. We think that there's nothing worth stealing. We have nothing of value that they would consider worth stealing from us. And we have this attitude that when we buy something, the security is already going to be implemented. There's no requirement around me doing something to secure the environment I'm using. And in addition to that, the bad guys know they have a better chance of compromising your system just for the simple fact it is your system. Okay, it's run by an elderly person who has no concept of security. So you're a target for a number of reasons, but not the ones you think of. Okay, not the ones you can think, okay, that's a good reason. So most attacks on the digital world are, and that includes about 80% of the attacks that are out there, are random attacks. Now they are, I'm going to send an email to these 500,000 people, or I'm going to send an SMS to this 400 phone numbers, or I'm going to pick up the phone and ring these 400 numbers. Okay, and so I can be any one of those people in one of those targeted environments. So it's random. I've got a 1 in 400 chance of getting an SMS because that was the level of what they were doing. Now, we're all random targets because we have access to money. Now, we may not think that it's a lot of money, but when it comes to the bad guys, $10 is $10, and they are quite happy to steal that information from you. We have personal identifiable information, so what we call PII, your information. So name, address, phone number, not a problem. But when we start talking about bank accounts, when we're talking credit card numbers, when we're talking about driver's licenses, when we're talking about passport numbers, all of those are really high-level personal identifiable information and should be protected as much as possible. We all have friends. We know people, friends, families, colleagues, anybody along those lines. So we are the target. We can be used to target them in other ways. And we have technology. We've just gone out and bought ourselves a device that is going to allow us to have access to the digital world, which means that we have to protect that technology as much as possible. And in addition to that, we have this trust problem, and I'll talk about trust later on, but we are easily scammed because we take our attitude to trust from the real world and put it into the digital world, and this is a really bad thing. If you're a random target, how well does it work against a retiree? So one of the problems with it, we have an uneducated attitude to the digital world. Now what I mean by that is we haven't been told what the digital world is capable of doing and how big a problem it can be. We are uninformed, and if you think about financial advice, for instance, you take advice from people in the club, family, people, workmates or non-professionals. Okay, we just go out and ask people a question and then we take that information as gospel. We are unaware and uninitiated in the ways of the bad guys. Okay, the bad guys are really, really bad at compromising our systems. But we have an attitude when it comes to doing that. The last one is we are petrified of the devices themselves. We don't, most devices are relatively secure when it comes to how do I protect those systems and how do I make sure that they are secure. We don't understand that there are things that are done by the devices that are going to be secure, but some of the insecure ways that we use those devices then causes us problems. So the retirees, seniors and the elders. For the last 15 years, most of the people who have been retiring have been coming from an organisation or a capability that has been managed by someone else. Okay, so we've got a device, it's a corporate device, there's security components in place that we know little about. All we know is that we can't get targeted for the simple fact that we are doing something around that requirement. When we get into our own space and our own home computers and our own smart devices, we still have this attitude that someone else is going to look after it. And if we have that attitude, then we are going to have problems. We are also being forced into it. Okay, so 15 years ago, 8% to 10% of government departments were online. You could do a few transactions online. Ever since that happened in 2020, governments are fully online. They now integrate information across all of the platforms. The same with banks. They even plug into government departments. They can plug into the tax department to tell you that when you populate your tax return, it all comes from all of these different locations. And corporations. We use corporations regularly. Facebook, for instance, or we use eBay or Amazon or any of those type of environments that we need to get information out of. So what can I tell you? When it comes to what advice am I going to tell you, one of the things you've got to take to heart is trust nobody. Mainly because your mate down the road who just sent you an email could already be compromised. So he sent you a piece of information or he sent you an email that comes into your system that can now infect your computer. Or he can set up a scam on your computer. Or you can actually, the email that they sent, if you've clicked on a link or opened up an application, now you are going to get a dedicated attack on your system because you have told other people that that phone number is viable or that email address is viable or that target system can be in place. So trust no one. If you're talking about defending against a cyber attack, get some professional help. So that's an IT person or a security person, or even go if you're a retiree and you knew the security people that were in your old organisation, have a word to them. What can I do to make myself more secure, more safe, more protected? Work out what you are lacking and make the necessary improvements. So that includes, you've spoken to the technical expertise. They have told you need to do X, Y and Z. If you can't do it, get someone else to help you to do it. Get some education. The more education you have about what the bad guys are capable of doing, the better you are. Which means that you are in a better situation if something goes pear-shaped. And you really don't want something to go pear-shaped. The last one is you need to be proactive, not reactive. In a situation where you are compromised or you get ransomware on your system, if you have thought that it'll never happen to me or I haven't got anything they're going to steal, and you now no longer have access to the grandkids' video of Christmas, or you no longer have access to the information that you stored on your video on your device from 30 years ago, now we have a problem. Okay, so plan for a failure and implement some contingencies. Do a backup. Make sure you're updating. Have an antivirus. Make sure you're using two-factor authentication. Use complex passwords. All of those basics will protect you significantly on the digital world. So if you want some help, then call us. But if you don't want to call us, talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. And when you're talking to people who are supposed to know, you are looking for security people who are working in IT, not IT people who are working in security. So contact us or contact your IT person. But please contact someone. Don't rely on your mate down the road or the mate in your pub or the person down the shed, anybody who doesn't work in this space, because you are still setting yourself up for a big fall. So thank you very much.